8-year-old girl is buried alive by her stepfather, until her mother hears noises coming from the coffin and calls 911. Before we dive into this story, tell us where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and enjoy the journey. It was a cold and quiet evening in the small town of Maplewood, the kind of night where the winds whispered through the trees and the stars flickered above like distant, forgotten promises. In a modest 2-story house on Oak Street, 8-year-old Alice sat alone in her room, staring out the window. The house felt different tonight. Emptier, colder. The silence felt heavier, almost suffocating. Alice had always been a curious, cheerful child, but something had changed in her parents over the past few months. Her mother, Linda, seemed distracted and distant, her eyes lost in thoughts that Alice couldn't reach. Her stepfather, Rick, was colder than ever. He hardly spoke to Alice anymore, and when he did, it was only to bark orders or make demands. She longed for the days when her parents used to laugh with her, hold her close, tell her she was special, but tonight something felt wrong. "Mom," Alice called softly, her voice trembling. No answer, just the sound of Rick's harsh voice downstairs cutting through the air like a blade. Rick's voice came again, louder this time. "I don't want to hear about it anymore, Linda. This is your problem, not mine." Alice could hear her mother's muffled reply, but the words were unclear. She pressed her ear against the door, heart pounding in her chest. Something wasn't right, but she didn't understand what. All she knew was that the warmth that used to fill their home had evaporated, leaving a cold emptiness behind. Alice's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, something soft, almost imperceptible, coming from outside her window. It was a whisper, like someone calling her name, but no one was there. She turned her gaze back to the window, heart racing. The shadows outside seemed to stretch and twist, as if the night itself was alive, watching her. As Alice shivered in the dim light of her room, she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming up the stairs. Her stomach tightened. It was Rick. The door to her room creaked open and Alice quickly wiped away the tears that had started to form. Rick stood in the doorway, his face a mask of indifference. "Get to bed, Alice," he muttered, his voice cold and emotionless. "You're not needed here right now." Alice opened her mouth to protest, but something in Rick's eyes made her freeze. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew she was no longer wanted. She nodded slowly and crawled into bed, pulling the covers over her head as if they could protect her from the cold, unfeeling world around her. But the silence in her room was deafening, and the whispers outside, they wouldn't stop. Something was coming. Alice could feel it. And then there was a sound, a soft tapping almost like fingernails against the wood. Alice's heart skipped a beat. The tapping came again, and this time Alice knew. It wasn't just the wind. Before she could react, the door to her room slammed open and Rick stood in the doorway, holding a shovel. His eyes were cold, distant, like he didn't even recognize her. "Alice," he said, his voice low and hollow. "It's time to go. No more running. No more pretending you matter." He walked into the room, the shovel in his hand glinting, ominously under the dim light. Alice froze, terror clutching her chest. "What are you?" Without answering, Rick grabbed her arm, pulling her roughly from the bed. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her body felt like it was paralyzed, every muscle frozen in fear. He dragged her down the hallway, ignoring her protests, ignoring her tears. They reached the basement, where Rick dropped her to the cold concrete floor. Alice's eyes darted around, looking for a way out. But there was nothing. Just dark, shadowed corners and the oppressive weight of despair. Rick turned to her, his face twisted into a cruel smirk. "You should have known better, Alice. You never mattered. You were just a mistake, a burden. You were never supposed to be here." Alice's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would fight. She had to. "Please, don't do this." Alice's voice trembled, but her words were barely a whisper. She didn't know if she was pleading for herself or for the girl she used to be, the one who still believed that love was real. Rick didn't answer. Instead, He raised the shovel and struck the ground with it, the sound of metal against stone echoing in the stillness. "Goodbye, Alice," he whispered. "This is the end for you." But just as the cold earth began to consume her, Alice heard a noise, a sharp, unmistakable sound, a knock coming from the direction of the basement window. To be continued. As you reflect on Alice's terrifying night, remember, where you're watching from makes a difference. Leave your comment below before we continue. The journey into the next chapter. As the cold, damp soil pressed against her chest, Alice's breath quickened, her body trembling with fear. The air was thick with the stench of earth and dampness, suffocating her. Her mind raced, trying to understand what was happening, what her stepfather had done. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped inside her, like the rest of her. Her heart pounded in her ears, deafening her to everything else. But then that knock, the sound, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the basement once more. A sharp, rattling sound that broke through the silence like a lifeline. Alice's pulse quickened as she strained to hear, her body lying immobile in the dirt. Was it real, or had she imagined it, a figment of hope in a sea of despair? Another knock, this time louder. Her mind tried to make sense of it, but the logic wasn't there. She was alone. Rick had gone upstairs, leaving her down here to die. There was no one else in the house, no one who could save her. And yet, the knock came again. "Help, help," Alice whispered, her voice breaking. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe for just a second that someone, anyone, had heard her, that someone might still care. But as quickly as the knock came, it stopped. The quiet pressed down once more, heavier than before. Alice took a shallow breath, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. She needed to stay calm. She needed to think. She couldn't let herself fall apart, not now. Suddenly, the faintest sound of footsteps broke the silence. They were light, almost imperceptible, but they were there. Alice's heart skipped a beat. Was it Rick, coming back to finish what he had started? Or was it someone else, someone who could save her? Her breath caught in her throat as the basement door creaked open above her. She didn't dare move, barely breathing as she strained. To listen, a voice faint and uncertain called from above. "Alice, is that you?" Her heart soared. She recognized the voice. "Mom?" Alice gasped, trying to call out, but her voice was barely audible. She pulled against the earth that encased her, desperate for any sign of her mother. She had to reach her. She had to be heard. "Mom, please help me. I'm down here." Alice's voice broke through the air, raw and desperate. Another pause. The voice came again, trembling. "Alice, sweetheart, where are you? Before her mother could finish, the basement door slammed shut. The footsteps receded. Alice's heart sank. Had she heard her? Had she just walked away? Alice didn't know how much time passed. It felt like hours, though it couldn't have been. Her body was stiff and cold, and the silence in the basement swallowed every ounce of hope that had just begun to bloom inside her. She thought she might die here, alone, forgotten. Then, just as her mind began to drift into darkness, another voice broke through. This time it wasn't her mother's. It was a stranger's voice, rough, but filled with urgency. "Alice, Alice, can you hear me?" the voice called, getting closer. The hairs on the back of Alice's neck stood up. She didn't know this person, but something in their voice made her believe they were real. She needed to answer. "Yes!" Alice cried, louder this time, trying to push her voice through the dirt, through the hopelessness. "I'm down here. Please. Help me." The footsteps grew louder, and soon the sound of a door opening echoed through the basement. Then the light hit her, a flashlight beam sweeping through the dark, searching. "Where are you?" the voice called again, more frantic now. "I'm here," Alice screamed, feeling the last of her strength fade. Her limbs felt like lead, but she forced herself to move, to push through the dirt that covered her, to find a way to be seen. A figure appeared at the top of the basement stairs. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a flashlight. He looked like someone who had come out of nowhere, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. But it was a good kind of fear, the kind that came from a genuine concern. "Hold on, sweetie. I'm getting you out of there," he said, his voice shaking but steady. "Stay with me, okay?" Alice couldn't respond. Her vision was fading, and she could feel her body shutting down. But she clung to his words like a lifeline. The man descended the stairs quickly, the beam of the flashlight illuminating his path as he reached her side. He knelt down beside her, his hands gentle but firm as he began to carefully clear the dirt from her body. She could hear his breath quickening as he worked. "Stay with me, kiddo. You're going to be okay," he murmured, brushing her hair from her face. His words weren't enough to erase the fear, but they were enough to make her believe that she had a chance. Alice's eyelids fluttered, and the world around her began to darken once more. But before everything faded into black, she heard the man's voice one more time, close to her ear. "I'm not going to let you die down here. Not while I'm still breathing." And then, nothing. When Alice awoke, she felt warmth, soft, enveloping warmth, unlike the cold, suffocating darkness of the grave she had just narrowly escaped. It was as if she had been pulled from one world into another, a place where her body could breathe again, her heart could beat again. She blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy and sticky as though she'd been asleep for days. Her head throbbed, a dull pain that seemed to echo from her temples. Her throat was dry, her tongue thick with thirst. But there was something else. The sense of safety. Her surroundings were unfamiliar. She lay in a small, dimly lit room, a small bed beneath her, and a soft blanket covering her. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness hit her, forcing her back onto the pillow. "Alice," a voice said softly, breaking through the fog in her mind. She looked over to see the man who had saved her, his face now clearer, his expression kind but tired. His features were sharp, strong, but his eyes held something softer now, as though they had seen too much pain in too little time. Hey, don't try to move too quickly. Just relax." He gently pressed her back down on the pillow. "You're safe now." Safe? Alice wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that all the terror she had felt, the suffocating darkness of the basement was just a bad dream. But the memory of being buried alive was too vivid, too real. I was buried," she whispered, her voice raw, trembling as she spoke. The man nodded, his face tightening as if the memory of what he had found was too much to bear. "Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that later. Right now you just need to rest, okay, Alice?" Wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the weight of exhaustion clung to her, and her body was simply too tired to fight. So she nodded weakly, closing her eyes. She could feel his presence beside her, steady and calming. He wasn't like Rick, the man who had tried to kill her. This man, this stranger, was someone who cared. He had saved her, and for that, Alice felt a flicker of gratitude, however small it might have been. But as sleep began to pull her back, under one thought burned in her mind. Where was her mother? Hours passed, or was it days? Alice couldn't be sure. Her mind drifted in and out of sleep, but the warmth and safety of the room never wavered. When she finally awoke again, the man was still there, sitting in a chair beside her bed, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. "You're awake," he said quietly, his voice a little raspy, like he hadn't spoken much in a while. He stood, crossing the small room to her side. "How are you feeling?" "Thirsty," she croaked. "And hungry. I'm so hungry." The man smiled softly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. He reached for a glass of water on the bedside table and handed it to her. "I'll get you some food in a minute, okay? You've been through a lot." Alice accepted the water, drinking it greedily. Her throat burned with each sip, but she didn't care. She needed it. She needed something to feel normal again. As she lowered the glass, she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at her ever since she woke up. "Who are you?" Her voice was quiet, hesitant, but her eyes never left his face. She needed to know. She needed to understand who this man was, why he had helped her, why he had saved her from the darkness. The man sighed deeply, as though the weight of her question was one he'd been dreading. He sat back down in the chair and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed to indicate his uncertainty. "My name's Tom," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of pain. "I'm a friend of your mom. Or, I used to be." Alice's mind immediately flashed to her mother, the memory of her mom's voice calling her from upstairs. The feeling of abandonment when the door slammed shut left her stomach in knots. Where was her mother now? "My mom?" Alice's voice wavered. "Where is she?" Tom's face tightened, his eyes flickering with something that Alice couldn't read. For a moment he didn't speak, and the silence stretched between them like a gap Alice couldn't cross. "I don't know where she is, Alice," Tom finally said, his words coming slowly, carefully. "I've been trying to get in touch with her, but she's not responding. I'm sorry." Alice's chest tightened. "No," she whispered, her breath catching. "She has to be looking for me. She has to be." Tom stood up and walked to the window, staring out as if the view could offer him answers. "I wish I had more information, but right now it's just the two of us. I'm going to help you. Alice, I promise." For a moment, Alice closed her eyes, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She had been buried alive, but now she was here, safe, with someone who claimed to care. But her mother was still out there, and Alice couldn't shake the fear that something had happened to her. She didn't know where her mother was. She didn't know if she would ever see her again. A loud knock on the door broke the silence. Alice's heart skipped a beat as Tom turned toward it, his posture stiffening. "Alice," a voice called from the other side. Her heart leaped. The voice sounded so familiar, so warm, like the voice of someone she'd known her whole life. "Mom?" Alice whispered, her breath hitching in her throat. Tom's face darkened. He stepped toward the door, his movements sharp and controlled. "Stay here," he said quietly, turning to her. "I need to see who it is first." And with that, he opened the door, leaving Alice alone in the room, the silence hanging in the air like a heavy shroud. Alice's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the door creak open. Her eyes stayed fixed on the space where Tom had just stood, now vacant. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating, leaving her with nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. Who was on the other side of the door? Could it really be her mother? After everything, after the pain of being left behind, could her mother actually be here now? The door clicked shut and Tom reappeared, his expression unreadable, as if the answer to Alice's unspoken question had already been decided. His footsteps were heavy as he approached her bed, his eyes focused on her but with a certain caution. "Alice," Tom began, his voice soft but firm. "It's not your mother." Alice's chest tightened at the words. "Who was it then? Who was that voice? I know it was my mom." Tom shook his head slowly, sitting back down in the chair beside her. "I know this is hard to understand, but I need you to trust me, okay? That person at the door wasn't your mom." Alice felt a chill wash over her. The hope she had clung to, the belief that somehow, against all odds, her mother would walk through that door to take her back into her arms, crumbled into dust. She felt a pang of emptiness deep in her chest. Tom continued, his eyes filled with an unspoken concern. "There's something going on, Alice. I don't have all the answers yet, but I promise I'll figure it out." Alice could hardly make sense of the jumble of emotions inside her. All she knew was that, once again, she was alone. The person she loved the most in the world, the person she had begged and prayed for, was nowhere to be found. Her voice came out broken. "Where is she then? What happened to her?" "I don't know," Tom said quietly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "But I'm doing everything I can to find her. I swear it." Just then, a loud thud echoed from the direction of the door, followed by muffled voices. Alice strained her ears, her heart leaping in panic. Tom's expression darkened. Without another word, he stood up again, his body tense. "Stay here," he instructed firmly. The man sighed deeply, as though the weight of her question was one he'd been dreading. He sat back down in the chair and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed to indicate his uncertainty. "My name's Tom," he said, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of pain. "I'm a friend of your mom. Or, I used to be." Alice's mind immediately flashed to her mother. The memory of her mom's voice calling her from upstairs, the feeling of abandonment when the door slammed shut, left her stomach in knots. Where was her mother now? My mom. Alice's voice wavered. Where is she? Tom's face tightened, his eyes flickering with something that Alice couldn't read. For a moment he didn't speak, and the silence stretched between them like a gap Alice couldn't cross. I don't know where she is, Alice, Tom finally said, his words coming slowly, carefully. I've been trying to get in touch with her, but she's not responding. I'm sorry. Alice's chest tightened. No, she whispered, her breath catching. She has to be looking for me. She has to be... Tom stood up and walked to the window, staring out as if the view could offer him answers. I wish I had more information, but right now, it's just the two of us. I'm going to help you. Alice, I promise. For a moment, Alice closed her eyes, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She had been buried alive, but now she was here, safe, with someone who claimed to care. But her mother was still out there, and Alice couldn't shake the fear that something had happened to her. She didn't know where her mother was. She didn't know if she would ever see her again. A loud knock on the door broke the silence. Alice's heart skipped a beat as Tom turned toward it, his posture stiffening. Alice? A voice called from the other side. Her heart leaped. The voice sounded so familiar, so warm, like the voice of someone she'd known her whole life. Mom? Alice whispered, her breath hitching in her throat. Tom's face darkened. He stepped toward the door, his movements sharp and controlled. Stay here, he said quietly, turning to her. I need to see who it is first. And with that, he opened the door, leaving Alice alone in the room, the silence hanging in the air like a heavy shroud. Alice's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the door creak open. Her eyes stayed fixed on the space where Tom had just stood, now vacant. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating, leaving her with nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. Who was on the other side of the door? Could it really be her mother? After everything, after the pain of being left behind, could her mother actually be here now? The door clicked shut, and Tom reappeared, his expression unreadable, as if the answer to Alice's unspoken question had already been decided. His footsteps were heavy as he approached her bed, his eyes focused on her but with a certain caution. Alice, Tom began, his voice soft but firm. It's not your mother. Alice's chest tightened at the words. Who was it then? Who was that voice? I know it was my mom. Tom shook his head slowly, sitting back down in the chair beside her. I know this is hard to understand, but I need you to trust me, okay? That person at the door wasn't your mom. Alice felt a chill wash over her. The hope she had clung to, the belief that somehow, against all odds, her mother would walk through that door to take her back into her arms, crumbled into dust. She felt a pang of emptiness deep in her chest. Tom continued, his eyes filled with an unspoken concern. There's something going on, Alice. I don't have all the answers yet, but I promise I'll figure it out. Alice could hardly make sense of the jumble of emotions inside her. All she knew was that once again she was alone. The person she loved the most in the world, the person she had begged and prayed for, was nowhere to be found. Her voice came out broken. Where is she then? What happened to her? I don't know, Tom said quietly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. But I'm doing everything I can to find her. I swear it. Just then, a loud thud echoed from the direction of the door, followed by muffled voices. Alice strained her ears, her heart leaping in panic. Tom's expression darkened. Without another word, he stood up again, his body tense. Stay here, he instructed firmly. What truth? Tom's eyes flashed to hers briefly, a flicker of regret in them. You're not just anyone, Alice. You're special, and there are those who would do anything to keep you from remembering who you really are. Alice's heart skipped a beat. Special? What was he talking about? She was just a little girl who wanted to be with her mother, not someone tangled in some kind of dark mystery. But Tom didn't elaborate. Instead, his foot pressed down harder on the gas and the car surged forward. Alice barely had time to take a full breath before she saw the shadow behind them, growing larger, closer. Someone was catching up. "Hold on," Tom warned, his voice strained as he swerved the car to the left, narrowly avoiding a pothole. "I need you to stay calm, Alice. We'll be okay, but we need to move faster." The engine roared as the car accelerated, its tires screeching against the asphalt. Alice's stomach lurched as she looked back out the rear window, catching a glimpse of the car tailing them. It was a sleek black vehicle, its headlights burning brightly in the dark. Whoever was behind them wasn't far behind. "Who are they?" Alice whispered, almost as if afraid to speak the words aloud. "They're not who they say they are," Tom replied, keeping his eyes firmly on the road. "They were sent to make sure you didn't remember what you know, to silence you. But I'm not going to let that happen." "Silence me?" Alice whispered, her heart thudding. "What do I know? What am I supposed to remember?" Tom's gaze shifted to her again, his face etched with concern. But he didn't answer, just kept pushing the car to its limits, weaving through traffic. Alice's mind raced, her thoughts bouncing between confusion and fear. She didn't understand. None of this made sense. Her mother was gone. The people following her were dangerous. And Tom, was he her ally or just another player in this nightmare? As if on cue, the black car behind them sped up, its engine growling menacingly as it closed in. Tom cursed under his breath and swerved again, narrowly missing an oncoming truck. The car's tires screamed against the pavement as they cut through the winding streets, trying to shake off their pursuers. But it wasn't working. The black car was too close. "Hold on," Tom shouted, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He made a sharp left turn, sending the car into a narrow alleyway. Alice gasped, clutching the seat as the car bucked and jerked from the sudden maneuver. The alley was too tight, too narrow, and Alice could hear the other car behind them, its tires scraping against the walls of the buildings as it struggled to keep up. But it wasn't fast enough. For a split second, Alice thought they might actually lose them. But then, with a horrifying screech, the black car slammed into the alley's entrance, blocking their escape. Tom slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt just inches from the vehicle ahead. He cursed again, his face turning pale as he looked around, searching for an escape route. There was nowhere to go. "Stay down!" Tom barked, grabbing Alice's arm and yanking her down into the footwell of the car. "Don't make a sound." Alice's heart pounded so loudly she was sure the people in the car behind them could hear it. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the terror creeping through her veins. Then she heard the unmistakable sound of doors opening, the sharp click of shoes hitting the pavement, and voices, cold, detached voices, closing in on them. "Tom," whispered fiercely, his breath ragged with panic. "Don't look up, Alice. Don't move. Just trust me." Alice nodded, trembling. She could barely hear anything over the sound of her own heart, thumping louder in her chest than ever before. She wanted to scream, to call out to anyone who might help, but she stayed silent, her body stiff with fear. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The footsteps drew closer. Alice could feel them, almost as if they were moving right through her. She dared to glance up, her eyes darting to the side mirror. She saw two shadowy figures standing beside the black car, one of them bending down as if inspecting their vehicle. Her breath hitched. They were looking for them. But they couldn't know they were hiding in the car. They couldn't. Suddenly the door of the black car slammed shut. The figures moved back, their voices low but urgent. Alice strained to hear. "We need to move fast," one of them said, his voice distorted by the alley's narrow walls. "She can't be far." Tom's grip on Alice's hand tightened. His voice was barely audible. "They know who you are, Alice, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." Alice's mind spun. What did they want from her? What could she possibly know that would make them go to these extremes? She wanted to ask, but Tom's warning echoed in her ears. "Stay quiet, we need to get out of here." The seconds stretched into an unbearable eternity. The figures stood by the black car, speaking in hushed tones. And then, just as quickly as they had arrived, They retreated back into the darkness, their footsteps fading away. Tom let out a long, relieved breath. We're not safe yet, but we've bought some time. He slowly lifted his head, scanning the alley. Come on, he said. Let's go. The car hummed softly as it sped through the darkened streets. Tom's hands were still gripped tightly on the steering wheel, his knuckles almost white, his eyes darting nervously to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Alice, still curled up in the footwell, couldn't shake the sense of unease. The adrenaline from their narrow escape still pulsed through her veins, leaving her both exhausted and wired. They had driven for what felt like hours, but in reality, it had only been a few minutes. Alice tried to collect her thoughts. She wanted to ask questions, many of them, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't fully process what was happening. Tom had been so cryptic, his eyes filled with too many secrets. She needed answers. Tom, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. Who are those people? What do they want with me? And why are you helping me? What's going on? Tom's grip on the steering wheel tightened further, his jaw clenching. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning the road ahead. There was a long pause before he spoke, his voice low, almost haunted. They want you, Alice, he said, his words heavy with an urgency that sent a chill through her. They want you because you have something they can't afford to lose. Alice frowned, confused. What do I have? Tom let out a sigh, his fingers tapping the steering wheel nervously. It's not just about what you have, Alice, he said, his voice strained. It's about who you are. You're not just a little girl caught in the wrong place. You're someone important. Someone they'll stop at nothing to control. The words didn't make sense. Alice felt a sharp sting of frustration. What do you mean, someone important? I don't understand. I'm just me. I don't even know who these people are or what they want with me. Tom's eyes flickered to her, a flash of sorrow crossing his face. I know it's hard to believe, he said softly. But you've forgotten, Alice. You've forgotten who you really are. Alice's heart skipped a beat. Forgotten? What do you mean? What did I forget? Tom took a deep breath, his hands loosening on the wheel as he glanced at her once more, his gaze filled with an unreadable emotion. It's not just your past you've forgotten, Alice. You've forgotten your power. My power? Alice repeated, bewildered. She was just a little girl. What power could she possibly have? Yes, Tom said, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Now. You don't remember, but you're different. The people who are after you, they know this. They know what you could become. Alice was silent for a long moment, trying to process his words. Her mind reeled. The pieces didn't fit together. Her head ached from the confusion. The only thing she knew for sure was that her life had just turned into something unrecognizable. Nothing made sense anymore. Why didn't you tell me this before? Alice asked, her voice small but insistent. Tom glanced at her again, his expression softened with a sadness she couldn't understand. I didn't want to burden you with it, he said. You were just a little girl, and you were safe before. But things have changed now. I have to protect you. Protect me from what? Alice's voice cracked with emotion. From them. Who are they? Why do they want me? Tom hesitated, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror once again. The black car that had followed them was no longer behind them, but the tension in the air didn't ease. Tom's hands tightened on the wheel again as he made a sharp turn onto another winding road. They want you because of your family, Alice, he said quietly, his voice strained. Because of your bloodline. You were born into something they've been trying to control for generations. Alice blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. My family? She echoed, her heart sinking. What do you mean? Tom let out a deep breath, clearly wrestling with something inside himself. Your family isn't who you think they are, Alice, he said, his voice rough. You were raised to believe they were normal, that you were just an ordinary girl. But that's not the truth. Alice's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel a knot tightening in her stomach. "What's the truth, Tom?" she demanded, her voice rising in desperation. "What aren't you telling me?" Tom was silent for a long time, his eyes focused on the road, his face grim. Then, slowly, he turned to her. His eyes were filled with a kind of remorse that made Alice's chest tighten. "Your mother," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother wasn't just your mother. She was part of something that goes back hundreds of years. And you are the key to it all." Alice's pulse quickened. "The key to what?" Tom didn't answer immediately. He took another sharp turn, driving deeper into the unknown. Alice could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, a sense of dread settling in her bones. "The people chasing us," Tom continued, "they want to find you, Alice. They believe that if they can control you, they can unlock something terrible. They believe you have the power to either destroy or save the world." Alice's breath caught in her throat. What are you talking about?" "I don't have any power. I'm just a little girl." Tom's eyes softened, but the urgency in his voice didn't lessen. "You might not remember it now, but it's inside you, Alice. The power your mother tried to protect you from. The power that could change everything." Alice's mind was spinning. Her mother wasn't just a mother, her family wasn't normal. What power? What did all of this mean? She wanted to scream, to cry out in frustration, but the words were trapped inside her, her confusion too great. "How do you know all of this?" she finally managed to ask, her voice shaky. Tom glanced at her once more, his gaze filled with regret. "Because I'm one of the few who knows the truth, Alice. And I've been protecting you from it all along. But now they're closing in, and you're the only one who can stop them." Alice was quiet, trying to wrap her head around everything Tom had said. But the more she thought about it, the less sense it made. She had no power. She didn't even remember who she was supposed to be. All she knew was that she was a scared little girl running for her life. But as they drove deeper into the night, something in her stirred. A flicker of recognition, a whisper of something familiar, like a forgotten memory reaching out to her. The road ahead was dark, but Alice could feel that the answers were getting closer. And so was the danger. The night seemed to stretch on forever. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustling of the leaves outside as the wind whispered against the windows. Alice couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Every word Tom had spoken had chipped away at the reality she once knew. Her entire life, everything she thought was true, felt like a fragile illusion. Tom's eyes flickered to her once more, his face shadowed by the streetlights that flashed through the windshield. He was clearly torn, burdened by something, perhaps guilt, perhaps fear. Alice could see it in the tense lines of his jaw, the way his hands gripped the wheel too tightly. "Are we going to talk about this?" Alice asked, her voice small but firm. She needed answers, real answers. The weight of uncertainty was too much for her to carry. "You can't just tell me all that and expect me to believe it without more." Tom sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had just been laid upon him. "I don't want to burden you with this, Alice," he said, his voice low. "You're still a child. You should be safe, living a normal life. But the truth is, you've never been safe, not really." She was silent for a moment, her heart racing. "So what now? What's going to happen to me? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Tom hesitated. The headlights of another car cut through the darkness, momentarily illuminating his face. He looked worn, his eyes older than they should have been, his hair graying at the temples. He wasn't just the man who had tried to protect her, he was someone carrying a heavy, dark secret. But it wasn't just about him. It was about her now. Alice knew that. "You have to make a choice," Tom finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "A choice that will change everything. The people coming. After you, they're not just anyone. They've been searching for you for years, trying to unlock the power you don't even know you have. And if they get their hands on you, there's no telling what they'll do with that power." Alice's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know. how to process this new information. The idea of being the key to something so dangerous was too overwhelming, but she could feel a weight on her chest, something telling her that what Tom said was true, that she was part of something bigger, something terrifying. "What do you mean by unlock the power?" Alice asked, her voice shaking. "What power are you talking about?" Tom glanced at her, his eyes darkening with a mix of sorrow and fear. "The power to change everything, Alice. To destroy things, or to save them. Your family's bloodline is tied to an ancient force, one that's been passed down for generations. Your mother tried to keep it from you, to shield you from this life. But now you've awakened it." Alice's mind was reeling. She wanted to argue, to scream that none of this made sense, that it was impossible. She was just a little girl. What could she possibly have inside her that was worth all this danger? But the truth was clear now. She had no choice but to face whatever was coming. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Alice asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why keep me in the dark? I could have prepared for this." Tom didn't answer right away. His hands tightened on the wheel, and for a moment, Alice thought he wasn't going to speak at all. But then he said, his voice low, "I couldn't tell you because I knew you weren't ready. I thought maybe if I kept you safe, kept you hidden, you could have a normal life. I never wanted you to have to choose between that life and the truth. But the truth is, that life was never meant to last. The people hunting you, Alice, they'll stop at nothing to get to you. And if they do, it's over." Alice swallowed hard. A knot twisted in her stomach as she tried to process everything. It was too much to bear. Her family, her mother, the people who had raised her, everything was a lie. But more than that, she had no idea how to fight back against something so big, so dangerous. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked, her voice cracking. "How can I fight something I don't even understand?" Tom was silent for a long time, his eyes focused on the road ahead, his face pale in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but full of a deep sadness. "You have two choices, Alice," he said, his voice soft. "You can keep running, keep hiding and hope that they don't find you. Or you can face them. You can choose to embrace your power and take control of your destiny. But that choice isn't an easy one. There will be consequences. There will be sacrifices. And you'll never be the same." Alice didn't know what to say. Her mind felt like it was spinning. How could she make a choice like that? How could she even understand what it meant to embrace a power she hadn't known existed until moments ago? For a long time, neither of them said anything. The tension in the car was thick, and Alice could feel the weight of her own thoughts pressing down on her. Every part of her wanted to scream, to throw up her hands and say, "This is too much." But she couldn't. She had to make a decision. "How do I even start?" she finally asked, her voice small and unsure. "How do I find this power? How do I unlock it?" Tom's eyes softened as he glanced at her. He seemed to consider something for a moment before nodding. "That's the hardest part, Alice. You won't find it by looking for it. You'll find it when you stop running, when you stop hiding from who you really are. The key to unlocking your power is inside you, inside everything you've already been through. It's in your memories, your pain, your strength. You have to find it, and when you do, you'll know what to do with it." Alice stared out the window, the world outside blurring in the darkness. She didn't know what that meant, but deep down she could feel something stirring inside her, a quiet, almost forgotten strength. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe she wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. Maybe she could fight back. Maybe she could stop running. The road ahead was dark, but Alice knew that whatever path she chose, it would lead her to something that would change her forever. And as Tom turned down a narrow, deserted road, Alice felt the weight of her decision settle in her chest. She was ready. The air grew heavier as Tom drove further down the desolate road, the faint hum of the tires against the asphalt, the only sound breaking the silence between them. Alice's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other like a storm she couldn't control. The revelation of her powers, of the ancient force hidden inside her, felt like a weight that would crush her at any moment. How could she be the key to something so immense? How could she possibly understand it all? She glanced at Tom, his face, a mask of determination. Yet there was something else, a trace of regret, as though he wished he could carry the burden for her. His words echoed in her mind, the idea of embracing her power, of making a choice that would change everything. But was she ready for that? Was anyone ever truly ready? "We're getting close," Tom finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but edged with a tension Alice could feel in the pit of her stomach. "Close to what?" Alice asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. "Close to the place where it all began. The place where you'll learn what you need to know." He hesitated before adding, "The place where you'll find your answers." Alice's pulse quickened, but she didn't know if it was fear or something else, something she couldn't quite identify. What answers could she possibly find? She was still reeling from the truth Tom had shared with her, and now they were heading toward some unknown destination that could either be a sanctuary or a trap. The car slowed as they approached. A small, seemingly abandoned house nestled in the woods. Its dark silhouette stood against the starless sky, the windows dark and unwelcoming. There was no light except for the dim glow of the headlights cutting through the night. It looked like a place lost in time, frozen between the past and the present. Tom turned off the engine, and the silence that followed felt oppressive. He didn't immediately move, and Alice, sensing the heaviness of the moment, stayed still in her seat. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to explain. "This is where it all began," Tom said quietly, his voice distant as though he were reliving memories too painful to bear. "It's where your mother and I first discovered the truth about you, about what you are. And it's where we made the choice to keep you hidden, to keep you safe." "Safe?" Alice repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "How was I safe, Tom? How was I safe when you kept me in the dark about everything? When you let me grow up thinking my family was normal, that nothing was wrong?" Tom winced, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I never wanted you to go through this, Alice. I never wanted you to know any of this. But now there's no turning back. You have to understand, your mother did what she could. She tried to protect you, but it wasn't enough. And now you have to face it." Alice stared at the house in front of them, her breath shallow. The weight of what was happening was suffocating. She didn't know what to expect from this place. Was it the key to unlocking her power, or was it just another part of the twisted web her life had become? Tom opened the door and stepped out of the car, his movements deliberate. Alice hesitated before following, her legs feeling as though they were made of lead. She had no choice. The answers she sought were here, and no matter how much it terrified her, she had to find them. As they walked toward the house, the sound of their footsteps echoed in the stillness of the night. The air smelled faintly of earth and decay, a reminder that this place had been abandoned for years. Alice's stomach twisted in knots as they reached the front door, which was slightly ajar. Tom pushed it open with a creak and they stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them whole, the only light coming from the faint glow of a flashlight Tom had pulled from his jacket. The house was in disrepair, its walls covered in peeling paint, the floor creaking under their weight. Dust hung in the air, and the smell of mildew was overwhelming, but none of that mattered. Alice was focused on the feeling that gnawed at her. Something powerful was inside, waiting for her. "Why did you bring me here?" Alice whispered, her voice trembling. "What's here that I need to see?" Tom didn't answer right away. He moved deeper into the house, his flashlight illuminating objects covered with sheets, remnants of a life long gone. The room they entered was dimly lit, but what caught Alice's eye was the old wooden table in the center, surrounded by faded chairs. On the wall behind it, a map was pinned, a map with strange symbols, lines drawn across it as though charting a course through something far beyond the boundaries of their world. "This is where your mother and I first found the truth about you, Alice," Tom said, his voice barely a whisper. We weren't just hiding you from the people who wanted to use your power. We were hiding you from yourself, from the world that would have tried to control you. Alice felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? How could anyone control me? Tom moved toward the table and gestured for Alice to join him. Because your power is the most dangerous thing in the world. The people who have been after you, the ones who tried to kill you, they know what you are. They want to control your power, harness it for their own gain. And they won't stop until they have it. Alice shook her head, her thoughts spiraling. What am I, Tom? What is this power you keep talking about? Tom turned to face her, his eyes filled with a sorrow that tore at her heart. You're the key, Alice. The bloodline you come from, the ancient force tied to your family. It's a force that can bend reality itself. It's something older than time, and only you can unlock it. The words hit Alice like a physical blow. She staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. No, she gasped. No, that can't be true. I'm just a kid. How can I have something like that inside me? Tom's eyes softened with compassion, but there was no denying the gravity of what he was saying. You're not just a kid, Alice. You're the only one who can stop this. Stop them from using your power to destroy everything. Alice's mind reeled. She wanted to deny it, to scream that none of this made sense, but the truth was staring her in the face. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She was the key to an ancient power that could reshape the world. But how could she embrace that power? How could she use something so dangerous? And most importantly, how could she fight the darkness that was coming for her? She looked at Tom, her voice breaking. I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can. Tom stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be with you every step of the way, but you have to. Make a choice, Alice. You have to choose who you want to be. Alice stared at the map on the wall, at the strange symbols, at the world she didn't understand. She felt as if her life was slipping through her fingers, her future uncertain, her past a lie. But deep down, in the pit of her stomach, she felt something stir, something ancient, something powerful. For the first time, Alice knew what she had to do. The room seemed to close in on Alice as she stood there, the map's strange symbols dancing before her eyes. Every inch of her being screamed for her to turn away, to run, to escape from the weight of the knowledge Tom had just dropped on her. But there was nowhere to run, not anymore. Tom was still watching her, his face filled with quiet urgency. His words had pierced through her like a shard of glass. You're the key, Alice. The power that had been dormant within her for so long now felt real, tangible, like a sleeping giant that could wake up at any moment. The thought made her feel small, fragile. She had always believed that she was just a normal girl, living an ordinary life, even with all the weirdness around her. But now she was supposed to be the key. The one thing that could either save the world or destroy it. I don't understand, Alice whispered, her voice trembling. She clenched her fists as though trying to hold herself together. How can I be the one to stop this? I'm just a kid, Tom. I don't have any of that power. Tom stepped closer to her, his presence calm yet intense. You do, Alice. You've had it your whole life. It's in your blood. It's part of who you are. And you're stronger than, you know? But I don't know how to control it, Alice countered, panic rising in her chest. What if I hurt someone? What if I can't stop it? Tom's eyes softened with compassion, and he gently placed his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. You won't hurt anyone. You have to learn. And that's why we're here. This is the place where you'll discover what you truly are. Where you'll start to control it. But how do I even start? Alice asked, her voice small and full of doubt. She felt like a child standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or turn back. Tom turned and walked to the wall, where the map was pinned. His fingers traced the lines, his eyes narrowing in focus. Your mother tried to protect you from this. She wanted you to live a normal life, but the moment you were born, your destiny was sealed. You can't run from it anymore. We can't run, and neither can they. They? Alice echoed, feeling a chill run down her spine. Who are they? Tom turned to face her, his expression now grave. The ones who've been after you, Alice. The ones who want to use your power to reshape the world. They know who you are, and they've been hunting you for years. Alice shuddered, her heart hammering in her chest. But why? Why me? Because you're the only one who can stop them, Tom replied, his voice heavy with the weight of the truth. The bloodline you come from, it holds the power to change everything, to rewrite the fabric of reality itself. If they get their hands on you, there will be no stopping them. For a moment, Alice couldn't speak. Her mind was reeling, trying to process what she had just heard. Everything she thought she knew about her life, about herself, had been shattered in an instant. She had spent years feeling like something was wrong with her, like she was different in a way she couldn't explain. Now it all made sense, and yet it made no sense at all. She looked down at the floor, trying to steady her breathing. What am I supposed to do? Tom took a deep breath and walked toward her, kneeling down so that they were eye level. You have to choose, Alice. You have the power to fight back. But you have to decide if you're ready for it. It won't be easy. And there's no going back. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the faint creaking of the old house as it settled. Alice's mind raced, torn between fear and a strange sense of purpose that was beginning to take root inside her. It felt like the pieces of a puzzle were finally coming together, pieces she hadn't even known existed, and yet the enormity of the decision weighed on her. Could she really embrace something so dangerous, so powerful? She looked up at Tom, her voice barely a whisper. How do I know if I'm ready? Tom's eyes softened, filled with a mixture of sympathy and something else, something like a quiet resolve. You don't. You never will. But sometimes, Alice, we don't get to choose when we're ready. We just have to step forward and trust that we'll find our way. Alice's heart pounded in her chest as the truth of his words settled into her bones. There would never be a perfect moment. No magical sign that she was ready. She had to make the choice, and it had to be now. I don't know if I can do this, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But if I don't, what happens? If you don't, Tom said, his voice low, they will come for you. They will come for all of us. And there won't be a world left to save. For the first time, Alice felt the weight of her family's secret like a living, breathing thing, an unstoppable force that demanded to be confronted. She couldn't keep hiding forever. She couldn't keep running. She turned back to the map. On the wall, her gaze lingering on the intricate symbols, trying to make sense of it all. Her pulse quickened, her hand twitching by her side, as if the power inside her was stirring to life, answering her call. I'll do it, Alice said finally, her voice stronger now, as if some invisible hand had lifted the fog that had clouded her mind. I'll fight, but I need to know how. I need to know what to do next. Tom smiled, a mixture of pride and relief in his eyes. We'll train, together. We'll unlock your power, and you'll learn to control it. But remember, Alice, this is just the beginning. The hardest part is yet to come. Alice swallowed hard, her mind still spinning with questions. But one thing was clear now. There was no turning back. She had made her choice. And now she would have to face whatever darkness awaited her. As they left the house and returned to the car, Alice felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The night air was crisp, and the world around her felt suddenly different, as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. But one thing was certain. She was ready. The battle had begun, and she would fight, no matter what it cost her. The next few days passed in a haze of strange new routines and intense training. Alice could feel the weight of the decision she had made settling in her bones, but beneath it was a flicker of something else. Power. Something deep inside her that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, as much as it terrified her, She had to face it. Tom was relentless in his instruction. Every moment he could spare, he spent guiding her, teaching her to control the energy that hummed beneath her skin. The house had transformed from a place of uncertainty to a sanctuary, where Alice felt like she was being forged into something new, something powerful. He would often sit her down and guide her through deep breathing exercises, helping her focus on the energy that was always swirling around her. At first, it felt impossible. There was nothing tangible to hold on to, no clear path to follow. But slowly, with each breath, she began to feel it, like a spark just beneath her skin, waiting to ignite. "There's a reason it's so hard to control," Tom had explained the first day. "Your power isn't just something physical, it's tied to your emotions. Fear, doubt, even joy, everything you feel, it amplifies the energy inside you. The more you understand yourself, the more control you'll have." Alice had always struggled to deal with her emotions. She'd spent her life trying to hide her feelings, to push them away. Now she realized that her power was born from them, and if she couldn't learn to control her emotions, her power would control her. On the 4th day of training, Alice began to experience something strange. It wasn't just the warm tingling she felt when Tom spoke of her power. It was real. It was like an electric current running through her veins, zapping her with each breath. The more she focused on it, the stronger it grew, like a wave crashing against the shore. She stood in the backyard, alone, the air still and cool against her skin. Tom had instructed her to try to summon the energy, to feel it rise within her. She closed her eyes, trying to tune out the sounds of the world around her, focusing solely on herself, on the power. For a moment, nothing happened. She stood there, silent and still, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, with a soft murmur, in her mind it began. It started as a flicker, like a match being lit in the dark. Her body tingled, her fingers sparking with energy. And then, with a sharp intake of breath, it exploded. A surge of power ripped through her, pulling her into the air, lifting her feet off the ground. Her hair whipped around her face as the wind picked up, and her heart raced with excitement and fear. "Alice!" Tom's voice shattered the moment, and the energy in her body faltered. She crashed back down to the ground, panting and wide-eyed. Tom was running toward her, concern etched across his face. "You're doing it. But you have to control it. You're letting it overwhelm you." Alice's hands shook as she looked up at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. What happened?" "You're learning," he said, his voice a mix of pride and caution. "But you can't let the power take over like that. If you let it run wild, it could hurt you, or, worse, hurt someone else." I didn't mean to," Alice stammered, feeling a pang of guilt. I don't know what to do." "You'll get there," Tom said reassuringly, kneeling beside her. "This is only the beginning. It's okay to make mistakes." But Alice knew it wasn't just about mistakes anymore. It was about learning to control something that could destroy her if she wasn't careful. There was no turning back now. She was being prepared for something bigger than herself, something that could change everything. As the day wore on, Tom continued to push her, testing her limits. He was harsh but patient, guiding her through every twist and turn as she struggled to harness the power within her. Every time she felt it slip out of her control, Tom was there, helping her find her footing again. But despite the setbacks, Alice began to notice something incredible. She was getting stronger. The power didn't seem as foreign anymore. She was starting to understand it. That night, as she lay in bed, the exhaustion of the day settled over her like a heavy blanket. But even as she closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something terrible. She didn't know how she knew it, but the sensation had been building in her all day, like a storm on the horizon, waiting to strike. Her thoughts kept drifting to the cryptic warnings Tom had given her. "They're coming for you, Alice. You have to be ready, but ready for what?" Her body was changing. She was changing. She could feel the power in every part of her, in the way she moved, in the way she breathed. But she didn't know if it was enough. the unknown enemy that Tom had warned her about. They were out there somewhere, and they would stop at nothing to use her. And if she didn't learn to control it soon, she would never stand a chance against them. The days grew darker as Alice's training continued, and each day felt like a race against time. With every new discovery, every breakthrough, came the undeniable truth. The longer she took to learn, the more danger she was in. Tom continued to stress the importance of focus and control, reminding Alice again and again that her emotions were the key. But no matter how hard she tried, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in her, something deep inside that was both exhilarating and terrifying. On the 6th day, after hours of rigorous training, she collapsed onto the ground, her body drained of energy. Tom stood nearby, watching her carefully, waiting for her to catch her breath. "You're doing better," he said, his tone measured but full of approval. "But the real test is still ahead." Alice lifted her head, her eyes bleary. "What do you mean?" Tom's expression darkened. "I can feel it, Alice. They're getting closer. You don't have much time." Alice swallowed hard. "Who are they, Tom? Who's coming for me?" Tom met her gaze, his eyes serious. "They are the ones who know what you are, the ones who want to control you, the ones who will stop at nothing to make sure you never learn the truth." Alice awoke the following morning to an unsettling silence in the house. The usual sounds of the wind rustling outside and birds calling from the trees had disappeared, replaced by an eerie stillness. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator seemed absent. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Tom had been quieter than usual the night before, and Alice noticed the tension in his movements as he prepared breakfast. He didn't offer his usual warm smile or playful banter, instead focusing intently on the task at hand, his face drawn with concern. As they sat down to eat, Alice studied him from across the table. His brow was furrowed and he seemed distant, his mind clearly preoccupied with something far beyond the routine of their training. "Tom," she asked hesitantly, "what's going on? You're acting different today." He paused, glancing up from his plate before setting his fork down. His eyes met hers, but there was a look in them she had never seen before. "Fear, Alice," he said slowly, his voice strained. "They're getting closer. I can feel it in my bones. It's not just a feeling anymore, it's a certainty. We don't have much time." Alice's heart began to race. The storm, the one Tom had been warning her about. It wasn't just coming. It had already arrived. She sat up straighter, her body tense. "Who are they, Tom? What do you mean?" Tom's face hardened, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "They are the Order, a group of people, or maybe more accurately, a faction that knows about your power. They're dangerous, Alice. They will stop at nothing to control you. They've been hunting you since the moment you were born." Alice felt the weight of his words sink in. Her head swam with confusion and fear. "I don't understand. Why me? Why would they want to control me?" Tom took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he gathered his thoughts. "You're not just any child, Alice. You're a part of something bigger. You're tied to an ancient power that has been passed down through generations. Your abilities aren't just random, they're the key to something far more important than either of us can fully comprehend. And that's why they're after you." Alice's mind raced as she tried to process everything he was saying. She'd always known something was different about her, but the idea that her very existence had been tied to some ancient, mysterious power was beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" she demanded, her voice rising in frustration. "Why keep it from me?" "I wanted to protect you," Tom replied softly, his eyes filled with regret. "If I had told you everything from the start, it would have only made things worse. I thought I could train you, prepare you without putting you in danger, but now it's too late. The Order is too close." Alice felt a cold wave of panic rise in her chest. She had spent years feeling powerless, abandoned, and now she learned that her life had always been under threat. She had never been safe, She had never truly been free. Tom continued, his tone urgent. We need to leave, now, before it's too late. Alice stood up, her knees trembling slightly as she pushed her chair back. Where will we go? Tom stood. To. His gaze hardening as he walked toward the window and peered out. I don't know yet, but we can't stay here. The Order has eyes everywhere. If they find us here, we're both dead. Her mind whirled with the implications of what Tom was saying. Her entire world, this small, isolated house she'd come to think of as home, was a lie. And now she was forced to run. We need to pack, Tom said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. But we can't take everything. Only what's essential. Your training isn't complete, Alice, but you'll have to rely on your instincts now. They'll be coming for you any day now, and if we're going to survive, we need to move fast. As Alice turned toward the door, she felt a strange calmness settle over her. The fear was still there, buried deep beneath the surface, but it was now joined by something else, determination. Her power was growing, and with it, her understanding of herself. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, even if she didn't fully grasp the picture yet. But one thing was clear. She had no choice but to fight. The Order was coming for her, and she wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. Not anymore. By the time they had packed the essentials, clothes, money, and a few weapons Tom had hidden in the back of a closet, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the room. The sky outside was an ominous shade of purple, the clouds gathering in a way that felt unnatural. Tom led Alice to the back door, and she couldn't help but glance back at the house. It felt like she was leaving behind a part of herself. But she couldn't afford to dwell on that now. We're going to head to the old cabin in the woods, Tom said, his voice low. It's secluded. I've used it as a hideout before. It's our best chance. Alice nodded, her heart pounding, her chest. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for sure. The storm wasn't just coming for her. It was coming for them both. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Alice heard something, a faint sound in the distance, barely audible over the rustling of the trees. A car engine, then another. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She could feel it. She wasn't imagining it. They were here. Tom grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the woods. Run, he urged, urgency thick in his voice. And they did. The dense forest around them seemed to close in as Alice and Tom ran, the sounds of their breath heavy in the air, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The trees loomed tall and shadowed, their branches creaking and groaning in the rising wind. But Alice couldn't shake the sensation that something was watching them. The soft rustle of leaves was joined by a more sinister presence, something not quite natural. It was as if the woods themselves had taken on a life of their own, bending to some unseen force. Tom pulled Alice along with a firm grip, his face set with grim determination. We can't stop. Not yet. Not until we reach the cabin. Alice's heart pounded in her chest, but she trusted Tom. His eyes, those stormy eyes filled with secrets, had never looked more serious, and she knew that if there was anyone she could rely on now, it was him. For the first time in her life, Alice could feel the weight of the power inside her stirring like a distant storm brewing in the back of her mind. It wasn't just fear she felt anymore. It was an unfamiliar sense of purpose, like a part of her that had been dormant for years was waking up. Tom, she gasped, struggling to keep up with his long strides. What's going to happen to us? We'll be safe for now, he said, not looking back. I'll protect you, but we have to move quickly. They moved through the trees with urgency, the wind now howling in their ears, the path growing steeper and more treacherous as they ascended the hills. It felt like the forest was fighting back, as if nature itself was conspiring against them. Branches reached out like twisted fingers, scraping at their skin, and the darkness seemed to deepen, thick and suffocating. They reached a small clearing, and Tom paused, glancing around. We're close, he muttered. Alice's legs burned, and Her chest ached from the exertion. She could hear the engines of the cars now, closer than before. They were coming for them. She knew it. She could feel the weight of the pursuit, a pressing sense of inevitability. Tom moved swiftly, pulling Alice behind a large oak tree. He peered through the dense underbrush, his eyes narrowing. "Stay here," he whispered urgently, his voice. "Dooney, I'll go ahead and make sure the cabin is clear. Stay out of sight." Alice nodded, too scared to speak. She watched as he vanished into the night, the silhouette of his figure disappearing into the forest like a shadow swallowed by the darkness. She was alone now, and the full weight of her fear began to settle in. Minutes passed. The sounds of the approaching cars were louder now, echoing through the trees. Alice's pulse quickened as she crouched down, trying to stay as quiet as possible. She glanced around nervously, every twig snapping in the distance sending a jolt of panic through her body. Her eyes darted back toward the path, and that's when she saw them. 2 men. Their faces obscured by the shadows, but their presence unmistakable. They were moving quickly, their steps measured as if they knew exactly where to look. One of them was carrying a flashlight, its beam sweeping through the trees with cold precision. Alice held her breath, feeling the urge to run. She glanced around, searching for a way out, but all she saw were trees and underbrush. She was trapped. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something. Movement. It was Tom, crouching low and moving swiftly toward the cabin. He hadn't seen her yet, but she could tell he was focused on something ahead of him. She wanted to call out to him, but she couldn't risk it. Not yet. The 2 men drew closer, their footsteps slow and deliberate. Alice's heart thudded in her chest, and she tried to steady her breathing. Her palms were slick with sweat as she tightened her grip on the rough bark of the tree. She knew they were close. Too close. But just as she thought they might pass. The unmistakable crunch of leaves beneath heavy boots froze her in place. One of the men stopped. His voice was low, but Alice could hear every word. "You feel that? Something's not right. I don't think we're alone." The air seemed to crackle with tension. Alice could barely keep her eyes open as she waited for them to move again, to walk away. But then she saw him. The other man had noticed her. "Over there!" he shouted. Without thinking, Alice spun and bolted into the woods, her legs burning with the sudden surge of adrenaline. She heard the men chasing after her, their steps crashing through the underbrush, but she didn't dare look back. She pushed herself harder, faster. Every branch that whipped past her seemed to tear at her skin, but she didn't stop. She could hear the men gaining on her, their heavy breathing echoing in her ears. There was nowhere to go. No escape. Then through the trees ahead she saw it. The cabin. With everything she had left, Alice rushed toward it, her feet barely touching the ground. She reached the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the handle, desperate to get inside. The door swung open just as the men reached the clearing, but Alice was already through, slamming it shut behind her. She slid down the wooden wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she tried to steady herself. Tom was inside, waiting for her, his expression hard as stone. "We don't have much time," he said in a low voice, moving quickly to the window, to peer outside. "They're right behind us." Alice's heart was still racing as she sank to the floor, her mind struggling to catch up with the rush of events. The storm was closing in, and she was no longer running from it. She was in the heart of it. As she glanced up at Tom, she saw a look of urgency in his eyes. "We need to move, Alice. They'll be here soon. And when they come, there's no turning back." The cabin was small, dimly lit by the flickering glow of a single candle. The storm outside raged as the wind howled, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundation of the old structure. Alice sat in the corner, her knees pulled tightly to her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. The sounds of the storm were deafening, but in the silence that followed, a soft whisper seemed to crawl through the room. Her eyes flickered to the shadows in the corners, but nothing moved. Yet, something felt wrong. Something was watching. Her Tom, standing by the window, his body tense as he peered into the darkness, didn't seem to notice. His focus was entirely on the forest outside, his every muscle coiled in anticipation. He had been silent for what felt like an eternity, his brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the trees. "Tom," Alice's voice was barely above a whisper, though she felt her heart beat in her throat. "What's happening out there? Why are they after us? What do they want?" He didn't turn to face her immediately, but when he did, his gaze was soft, almost pained. "They want you, Alice. They want what you have inside you, what you are." Alice felt the cold weight of his words settle on her chest like a stone. What she was. She didn't understand. Was she special? Was that why this entire nightmare was happening? "You've always been more than you know," Tom continued, his voice distant, as though he were wrestling with something inside. "More than I even realized until recently, and I've done everything to keep you safe. But we're running out of time." The wind howled again, and Alice felt the presence of something darker lurking in the room with them. Her breath caught in her throat as the shadows in the corner seemed to stretch, creeping across the floor, reaching toward her. "Tom," she whispered again, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up, but he was already moving, grabbing her arm with urgency. "Listen to me, Alice. We don't have time for questions right now. They're closer than ever, and I need you to trust me. Trust that I will keep you safe. I promise. Do you understand?" Alice nodded, though her mind was a tangled mess of confusion. Her trust in Tom had been absolute, but now she could feel something shifting. Something within herself, too. Was she meant to be saved, or was she something to be feared? The door rattled. Then a soft thud. The men from before, whoever they were, had reached the cabin. Tom moved quickly, securing the windows and bolting the door shut with a heavy lock. But even as he worked, Alice could see his eyes flickering with an edge of panic he hadn't shown before. "You have to listen closely, Alice," Tom said, his voice harsh, pulling her away from the corner. "We can't let them find us here. If they do, it's over. You'll be dragged back and there will be no escape. But why? Why are they after me?" Alice's voice trembled, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Tom's face hardened. He walked over to a small cupboard and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. It was old, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. He flipped through the pages quickly, muttering to himself in a language Alice didn't understand. Finally, he stopped. He looked at her with a sadness in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "Alice," he said quietly, "you were born with something. A power. A power. They've been hunting for years. Your blood, your lineage. It's not like theirs. It's not like any of them. You are the key to something far bigger than this world can understand." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Tom took a deep breath. "I didn't want to tell you this until I knew it was safe, but you're one of the last of your kind, a descendant of an ancient order, an ancient power. You've been marked from birth, Alice, and they've been searching for you because they know. They know what you can do." "What can I do?" Alice asked, her voice shaking. "You can change the world," Tom said simply. "If they get to you first, they will use that power to control everything. They'll use it to reshape everything, bend it to their will, and it won't just be us, everyone will suffer." Alice's stomach churned. She didn't understand it all, but she knew this was real. The truth was in Tom's eyes, and it was more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. Just then, a loud bang echoed from outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of a door splintering. Alice's breath caught in her throat. The men had broken through. "They're here," Tom muttered under his breath, his voice tight with fear. He grabbed Alice's arm again, pulling her toward the back of the cabin. "We need to move now." Before Alice could react, the door flew open, crashing against the wall, and a figure stood in the doorway. A man, tall, imposing, dressed in dark clothes. His eyes gleamed with something predatory, and Alice felt a shiver race down her spine. "Tom," the man said, his voice low and mocking. "You should have known we'd find you eventually." Tom stepped forward, positioning himself between Alice and the intruder. "You're too late, Mason," he spat. "You won't get her." Alice didn't recognize the man, but something in her chest tightened at the sight of him. She could feel the power inside her thrumming, awakening, responding to the presence of this man, this Mason. He was one of them. Mason smiled. It was a cruel, chilling smile. "We'll see about that." He raised his hand, and suddenly the air around them grew heavy, oppressive. A wave of force slammed into the cabin, knocking Alice off her feet. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath as the world spun around her. But in that instant, something inside her snapped. She had had enough. With a cry of sheer defiance, Alice surged to her feet. Her mind, her soul screamed out in fury. The power within her surged, hot and raw, and she thrust her hands forward. Brilliant, blinding light erupted from her fingers, streaking through the room and crashing into Mason, sending him flying backward with a scream of pain. For a moment, everything was silent. Mason lay on the ground, his body twitching, smoke rising. From his charred clothes, Tom stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Alice," he whispered, his voice full of awe. Alice stood there, trembling, her hands still glowing with energy. She was terrified, but a fire had ignited within her. The storm outside raged louder, and Alice realized this was just the beginning. The storm outside had only grown more intense, as if the world itself was responding to the battle that had just unfolded inside the cabin. Alice stood there, trembling, the air around her still crackling with the residual energy of her sudden outburst. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, and the soft glow around her hands faded as the adrenaline slowly ebbed from her veins. Tom was still staring at her, his face a mask of awe and disbelief. He had seen her react before, but nothing like this. This was different. There was power in Alice. Real power. A power that could tear through the very fabric of the world. If left unchecked, the figure of Mason, now lying motionless on the ground, twitched once more. His body was smoking, the singed edges of his clothes still emitting faint wisps of smoke. Tom took a step forward, kneeling beside the man, but his eyes never left Alice. "This isn't over," he said quietly, almost to himself. "He's not dead." "Alice?" "Not completely." Alice stepped back, her gaze flickering to the still form on the ground. "What do you mean?" I hurt him. He's not moving. That should be enough, right?" Tom shook his head slowly, standing up. "Mason and the others, they're not human. Not entirely, at least. What you just did was powerful, but you've only just begun to unlock it. And he pointed toward the man on the ground. "They're not going to stop until they get what they want." Alice felt a heavy weight in her chest. She had known that whatever had been chasing her wasn't normal, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just running from ordinary people. She was running from something ancient, something dangerous. Tom walked over to the window, glancing out into the dark, storm-tossed forest. His posture was tense, like a man on the edge of breaking. He turned back to Alice, his voice urgent. "We need to move now. They'll be coming for us soon. Mason wasn't alone. There are more out there, and they won't hesitate to kill us to get to you." Alice's heart sank. She didn't understand it all, but she understood one thing. If she stayed here, if she trusted Tom, she might just end up like Mason. But she didn't have many options, and she still had questions. Big questions. Tom, who are they? What are they, and why me? Why do they want me? Alice asked, her voice small but steady, despite the chaos in her mind. Tom exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm himself. Even though the cabin was warm from the candlelight, he ran a hand through his hair, as if he were debating whether or not to tell her. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You were born into a bloodline that's been hunted for generations, a bloodline that holds the key to unimaginable power, the Order. That's what we call it. They've been searching for your kind for centuries, and you, Alice, are one of the last to carry that blood. But I'm just a little girl." Alice's voice trembled slightly as she spoke the words, but she held her ground, determined not to back down. "I know," Tom said. his voice softening for the first time. "And that's why they think you're an easy target. But you're not. You never were. They want you because of the power that runs through your veins, power that can change everything. You can alter the balance of this world, Alice. You could even rewrite history if you wanted to. And that terrifies them. So they will stop at nothing to control you." Alice shook her head in disbelief. She felt the weight of his words, but they didn't quite make sense. She wasn't special. She was just a girl, just a little girl who had been abandoned, who had been running for so long, trying to find a place to belong. "Why didn't you tell me all this sooner, Tom?" Alice asked, her voice small, but there was a note of hurt in it. Tom's face twisted in guilt. "I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to carry the weight of this, of them, on your shoulders. But now, Alice, it's too late. They know you're awake and they'll stop at nothing to take you." Alice looked down at her hands. They had glowed earlier, pulsating with power. She could feel the remnants of it humming just beneath her skin, like a low, insistent whisper. She wasn't sure what it was, what it meant, but it was undeniable and terrifying. "They'll come for me," Alice murmured, more to herself than to Tom. "They will," Tom confirmed, his voice grim. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." Alice's eyes met his, searching his face for something, anything that would make this make sense. But she found only the same fear that she had been carrying all along. The storm outside had reached its peak, the wind howling louder than ever, rattling the windows as though the very sky was trying to tear the world apart. It felt like the storm was a reflection of the chaos inside her. Tom grabbed her by the shoulders gently, his hands shaking but his grip firm. "We can't stay here, Alice. Not for long. We have to go. They'll know we're here soon. We need to disappear. We need to get to the only place they won't be able to follow us." Alice swallowed, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. She had no idea where they were going or how this nightmare would end. But one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something hopeful, something that said maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them. "There's a place," he said, his voice steady now. "A safe house, a place where you can learn what you are, where we can find out how to stop them. But it's far from here, Alice, and they'll be searching for us every step of the way." Alice nodded, her mind spinning with questions, but for the first time she felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just running anymore. She was running towards something, and as Tom opened the door and the night swallowed them whole, Alice steeled herself for the journey ahead. Whatever came next, she would face it head on, because she had no choice now, and neither did they. The night air was thick with tension as Alice and Tom stepped outside, the storm's fury pressing in around them like a living thing. The wind howled through the trees, branches whipping violently, but it didn't matter to Alice. Nothing seemed real anymore. The world had shifted on its axis, and she was no longer just a little girl running from shadows. She was a pawn in a much larger game, one she barely understood. Tom's hand gripped hers tightly as he led her through the dense forest, his steps quick, purposeful, but his face masked with concentration. He was acting like he had a plan, but Alice could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He was scared, just like her. The darkness around them felt oppressive. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig beneath their feet made Alice's heart race. They weren't alone. She could feel it. Something was watching them. Something that wanted her. "Tom," she whispered, her voice small in the cacophony of the storm. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the trees, scanning the shadows. "We're almost there, just a little further." But the more they walked, the more Alice felt the creeping sense of dread tighten around her. The wind was picking up, the storm intensifying, but something else, something darker, was beginning to take form. It was like the world itself had become hostile. It wasn't just the storm anymore. It felt like the forest itself was closing in around them. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind tore through the trees, knocking branches loose, and Alice froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She heard it, the low, guttural growl from somewhere deep in the darkness. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was something else. "Run," Tom growled, and Alice didn't hesitate. She sprinted, her feet pounding the ground beneath her, heart racing. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, giving chase. "Faster, Alice," Tom barked, pulling her along as they weaved through the trees. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed in protest, but she pushed forward, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Alice glanced over her shoulder and saw the shadowy figure of a man, or something like a man, pursuing them, its form flickering in and out of the darkness like a wraith. It was fast, too fast. "Who? What is that?" Alice cried, barely able to keep up with Tom's frantic pace. "Don't look back, Alice," Tom shouted, but it was too late. The figure was nearly upon them. Tom spun around, pushing Alice toward a nearby hill. "Climb, go!" Alice obeyed, scrambling up the muddy incline, her hands slipping on the wet earth. She reached the top, breathless, heart pounding. But Tom wasn't far behind, and the shadowy figure was gaining on them, its growl vibrating in her bones. Just when Alice thought they were done for, Tom pulled something from his coat, an old, tarnished key, and jabbed it into a hidden lock embedded in the side of a rock formation. A section of the earth shifted, revealing a narrow opening leading into a dark tunnel beneath the hill. "Get in. Now," Tom ordered, urgency in his voice. Alice didn't hesitate. She dove into the tunnel, her legs scraping against the jagged rocks, the air growing cold and damp around her. Tom followed quickly, sealing the entrance behind them just as the creature let out a primal scream. The tunnel was pitch black, and the air was thick with the smell of earth and mildew. Alice could barely make out Tom's outline ahead of her, but his presence was enough to keep her from panicking. They walked in silence for what felt like an eternity, the only sound the echo of their footsteps against the cold, hard walls. It was only when they reached a small underground chamber that Tom finally spoke. "You're safe for now," he said, his voice hoarse from the exertion. He was panting, and for the first time since Alice had met him, he looked defeated. His face was pale, the storm's adrenaline fading from his body, leaving only exhaustion behind. Alice swallowed, still too shaken to speak. She tried to calm her racing heart, but found it impossible. Her mind was flooded with images of the creature, the thing that had been chasing them. She wanted to ask Tom more questions, but she didn't have the words. What could she even ask? Why had this happened? Why was she involved? And what was that thing? Tom sat down heavily against the cold stone wall, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with concern. "You need to understand, Alice. This isn't just a matter of survival anymore. It's about something much bigger than you and me. The world is changing, and you—" He stopped, staring into the distance as if he was weighing something in his mind. Then he sighed heavily and met her gaze. "The Order isn't just after your bloodline. They want control. The power you have is dangerous, Alice. It's more than just the ability to fight them. You can bend reality itself. You can shift things, time, space, even life and death." Alice's brow furrowed as she processed his words. "What do you mean by that? I don't have any of that power. I'm just a girl." Tom shook his head. "No, you're not just any girl. The blood in your veins. It's from a line of powerful individuals who could manipulate the very fabric of existence. It's not just some ability. It's the key to the future of this world. And they want it more than anything. But I don't know how to control it," Alice protested, her voice shaky. "I didn't even know I had it until today. I don't want this, Tom. I just want to go home." I know, he said gently. "But we can't go back. Not anymore." Alice's mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything. She had never asked for any of this. She didn't want power. She didn't want to be hunted. She just wanted to be safe. "Tom, What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone else? What if I hurt you? She whispered, her voice trembling. Tom's gaze softened, and for a moment he almost looked like a father figure. You won't hurt me. I promise. You're stronger than you realize. And you're not alone, Alice. I'm here. I'll help. You. But we can't do this alone. We need to find others, people like you, like us. And we need to stop the order before they get any closer. Alice nodded slowly, her heart heavy with uncertainty. But she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to stop all of this. Let's go then, Alice said, her voice steadying. Let's end this. Tom's eyes brightened. It's going to be a long journey, Alice, but together we can do this. And, as the echo of their footsteps rang out in the silent tunnel, Alice knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. Alice and Tom continued through the cold, damp tunnel, the air growing mustier. With each step, the sound of their footsteps echoed off the stone walls, an eerie reminder of their isolation. Alice's heart was still pounding, her mind unable to shake the image of the shadowy creature that had chased them. What was it? And why had it wanted her so badly? Are we safe here? Alice asked, her voice small and uncertain. Tom didn't answer right away. He was focused on the path ahead, his eyes scanning the dim light. The only source of illumination came from a faint, flickering torch that hung from the wall, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Tom's jaw was tight, his expression serious. This place is safe for now, he finally said, his voice low. But we can't stay here forever. The Order will track us. They won't stop until they find you. Why? Why do they want me? Alice asked, her voice trembling. Tom stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes softened, but there was a weight to his gaze that made Alice uneasy. Because you're special, Alice. Your bloodline has power, a power that can change everything. The Order believes that if they can control you, they'll control the world. Alice shook her head, trying to wrap her mind around what he was saying. But I don't have any powers. I'm just a girl. Tom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his grip surprisingly warm despite the cold air around them. You may not understand it yet, but you have abilities that go beyond what you can see. You just need to learn how to control them. And we need to find someone who can teach you before it's too late. Alice swallowed, the fear bubbling up inside her again. What if I can't learn? What if it's too much for me? You'll learn, Tom said with conviction. And you're not alone. I won't let them get you, I promise. They continued walking in silence, but Alice could feel the weight of Tom's words hanging over them. What had she gotten herself into? She had been so caught up in the mystery of the storm and the strange things that had happened to her. But now, it felt real. She was in danger. And the only way out was to confront the very thing that terrified her. The power inside her. They walked for what felt like hours, the tunnel winding and twisting in ways that made Alice's head spin. She tried to distract herself, but her mind kept drifting back to the creature in the woods and to the strange promise Tom had made, that she had power within her. It seemed impossible. She couldn't even comprehend what that power was supposed to be. At last, they came to a small clearing in the tunnel. The walls here were covered in strange symbols, ones Alice didn't recognize. They were carved into the stone, their lines jagged and intricate, almost as if they were alive. There was a faint hum in the air, like the energy of the symbols was vibrating, radiating outward. This is it, Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. The hidden path. We're close. Close to what? Alice asked, her voice trembling. Tom stepped forward, his fingers tracing one of the symbols on the wall. It glowed faintly beneath his touch, and a hidden doorway appeared, sliding open with a soft hiss. Close to the people who can help you. Control your power. Alice stepped back, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had known Tom was mysterious, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. What kind of people were they going to meet? And what exactly was the power she was supposed To learn to control. Without waiting for her to speak, Tom moved toward the doorway and gestured for Alice to follow. Come on, Alice. This is where your real journey begins. The door opened into a vast chamber. The walls were lined with ancient books, their pages worn and yellowed with age. At the center of the room, a large table was covered with maps and old scrolls, some of them marked with strange symbols similar to the ones on the tunnel walls. Seated at the table were two people, both of them older than Alice had expected. One was a tall, thin man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, his expression stern but welcoming. The other was a woman with dark hair, her face soft but marked with years of hardship. Her eyes were kind, though they held a sadness that Alice couldn't quite place. Tom stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is Alice," he said, his tone serious. "The one I told you about." The man looked up, his eyes studying Alice with a piercing intensity that made her feel exposed. "So you're the one," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. "The girl with the bloodline." Alice flinched at the mention of the bloodline, but she didn't have the strength to question it anymore. She was exhausted, her mind clouded with fear and confusion. The woman at the table stood up and smiled warmly at her, as if trying to ease some of the tension. "Come here, child," the woman said gently. "We have much to discuss." Alice hesitated but then stepped forward, her curiosity outweighing her fear. The woman reached out and took her hand, her grip gentle but firm. "We are the keepers," the woman explained, her voice calm and soothing. "And we have been watching over your bloodline for centuries. Your power, Alice, has been passed down for generations, and now it is your turn to understand it." "But how do I control it?" Alice asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man stood up, his eyes never leaving Alice. "First, you must understand what it is. The power inside you is not just magic. It is the ability to shape reality itself, to bend time, space, and even life. But it is also dangerous. It can consume you if you're not careful. That is why we are here." Alice felt her breath catch in her throat. She had been terrified before, but now, hearing it from these people, the terror felt real. "I don't want this power," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't want to hurt anyone." The man nodded gravely. "We understand, Alice, but whether you want it or not, it is a part of you. And you must learn to control it, or the Order will take it from you, and they will use it for far worse things than you can imagine." Alice swallowed hard, her mind reeling. She had never felt more alone than she did in that moment. She was trapped, in a world she didn't understand, with a power she didn't want, and enemies who wanted to use it for their own gain. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. "How do I start?" she asked quietly. The man's lips twitched into a faint smile. "First, we'll teach you how to focus. The key to your power lies in your mind. You must learn to quiet the chaos inside you before you can control what's outside." Alice nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything, and somewhere, in the back of her mind, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the faint glow of ancient candles flickering along the edges of the stone walls. The air smelled of dust and something earthy, like old books and time itself. Alice sat on the cold stone floor, her knees pulled to her chest, as she watched the two keepers carefully. The man with silver hair, who had introduced himself as Merrick, stood before her, his expression intense but not unkind. The woman, Lyra, sat beside Alice, her calm demeanor offering a quiet comfort amidst the chaos swirling in Alice's mind. "Are you ready to begin?" Merrick asked, his voice calm but firm. Alice swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to say no, to turn around and run. This power, this burden, it was too much for her, but she couldn't. Not after everything she had seen, everything she had experienced. She was already too far into this to walk away. I guess so," she muttered, her voice trembling slightly. Merrick nodded and motioned for her to stand. "Then, let's begin. First, we must teach you the most important lesson of all, the power of focus. Lyra smiled gently, placing a hand on Alice's shoulder. Don't worry, child. We'll guide you. Just trust us and trust yourself. Alice took a deep breath and stood up, trying to steady her racing heart. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and fears. She wanted to know what kind of power was inside her, how it worked, and what it would mean for her future. But the words of the keepers, calm and reassuring, pushed her forward. Merrick's eyes never left her as he began to speak again. Your power is not something that can be controlled by force. It's not about strength or willpower. It's about stillness, about quieting the noise in your mind. Only then can you tap into what's inside you. Alice furrowed her brow, struggling to grasp his meaning. How do I do that? How do I stop the noise? Merrick stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Close your eyes. Focus on your breath. In and out. Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. Don't think about anything else. Let everything else fall away. Alice did as he instructed, closing her eyes and breathing slowly. She could hear the steady beat of her heart, the echo of her breath in the quiet chamber. It was peaceful, but her mind was far from still. Images, thoughts, questions, everything rushed to the forefront, demanding her attention, but she kept breathing, trying to quiet the storm inside her. Good, Merrick said softly, his voice a steady anchor. Now picture the energy inside you. Imagine it like a spark, a flicker of light deep within your chest. See it in your mind. Focus on it, but do not grasp it. Just let it exist. Alice's breath caught as she tried to do as Merrick said. She had never thought of herself as powerful, not in any sense. But as she focused, she could almost feel something stirring deep inside her, something warm and alive. It pulsed faintly, like the beat of a heart. She felt a sudden surge of anxiety, the flood of thoughts trying to push through her focus. The spark flickered, dimmed, and the warmth inside her faded. No, focus, Merrick said sharply. Let go of the doubts. Let go of everything that is not this moment. Alice clenched her fists, biting her lip in concentration. She wanted to succeed, wanted to make sense of all of this. Her power, her purpose. If she could just get a grip on it, she wouldn't feel so lost. She tried again, breathing deeper, this time pushing away the noise, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the spark inside her began to glow brighter. That's it, Lyra whispered from beside her, her voice filled with quiet encouragement. Don't fight it, Alice. Allow it to happen. Alice's breath quickened as she felt the warmth of the spark spread outward, growing in intensity. It was as though it was awakening from a long slumber, and with it a flood of new sensations. She could almost hear it, like a hum deep within her chest, vibrating through her bones. She opened her eyes, her heart pounding. Merrick was watching her closely, his face unreadable. You felt it, didn't you? The power is there, Alice. You only need to learn how to control it. Alice nodded, her head spinning. With the realization of what had just happened, she had felt something. It was faint, fleeting, but it was there. The power was real. But how do I control it? She asked, her voice shaky. You've taken the first step, Merrick replied, his tone softening. The key is trust. Trust in yourself and in the power inside you. The more you trust, the stronger it becomes. And once you have that trust, the real work begins. Lyra looked at Alice with a kind smile, her eyes full of warmth. You've done well, child. But this is just the beginning. The path ahead will be difficult, and you will face many challenges. But we are here to help you every step of the way. Alice glanced at them both, feeling a small flicker of hope in her chest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she wasn't entirely alone in this fight. These people, the keepers, were offering her guidance, support. Maybe, just maybe, she could learn to control this power after all. But as she looked at the swirling symbols on the walls and felt the hum of energy around her, Alice knew that the true test was still to come. The order was out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted from her. She had to learn quickly. There was no time to waste. "Will I be ready in time?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Merrick met her gaze with a steady, unwavering look. "You will be, but only if you are willing to learn, to grow. Your strength lies within you, Alice. The question is, will you embrace it?" Alice's heart raced, the weight of his words settling deep within her chest. She had no choice but to embrace. For her own survival, and for the future of everything she held dear. The night air felt unnaturally still as Alice stood at the edge of the cliff, gazing out at the endless horizon. The moon was a thin sliver in the sky, barely casting any light, and the winds whispered through the trees below. It had been weeks since her first lesson with Merrick and Lyra, and while her power had grown in ways she hadn't thought possible, she still felt as though she were standing at the precipice of something much larger, something far more dangerous. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" Alice's voice broke the silence as she spoke to no one in particular. Lyra appeared beside her without a sound, her presence as calm and assured as always. "What do you mean, child?" Alice turned to face her, her eyes reflecting the uncertainty that churned inside her. "I mean, all these things I'm learning, all this power I'm supposed to wield. What's the point if the order is out there watching? They won't stop until they get what they want from me, no matter what I do." Lyra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on Alice's shoulder. "I understand your fear. The Order is a formidable force, and their thirst for control is endless. But you are not alone in this. We have given you the tools to fight, and if you trust yourself, you will prevail." Alice shook her head, her thoughts swirling like a violent storm. "But I'm not sure I can do this. I've only just begun to understand my power. What if it's not enough? What if I fail?" Lyra studied her with quiet intensity, as though searching for the right words. "You must understand that true strength does not come from the power you wield, but from the choices you make. Fear is the true enemy. It clouds your judgment, weakens your resolve. You must learn to see beyond it." Alice looked down at her hands, feeling the pulse of energy that now thrummed beneath her skin. She had felt it grow stronger in recent days, more volatile, more uncontrollable. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it at bay. "Fear is the one thing the Order doesn't have," Alice murmured, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "And that's why they win. They use it to break people down, to force them into submission." Lyra's expression grew serious. "That's why you must learn to turn it around. Use it. Don't let it use you. When you control your fear, you control your power. And when you control your power, you control your fate." Alice nodded, though she didn't fully understand. The weight of her future, of the fate of everyone she loved, rested heavily on her shoulders. Every decision, every step she took felt like it could mean the difference between life and death. For herself, and for those around her. A rustle in the trees broke her thoughts and she immediately tensed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her heart racing. Lyra nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Stay alert. The Order has spies everywhere. They're getting closer." Alice's breath hitched. The feeling of being hunted, of being so close to the enemy without even realizing it, was suffocating. She had learned to sense the presence of others, but the sensation now was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The air seemed thicker, as if it were pressing in on her from all sides. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in black, moving silently toward them. Alice's pulse quickened as she recognized the familiar, chilling silhouette. A member of the Order. "Get back," Lyra hissed, stepping in front of Alice, her posture rigid and defensive. She raised her hand, and a soft pulse of light emanated. From her palm, Alice felt her breath catch in her throat. This was the first time she had seen Lyra use her full power, and the sheer intensity of it left her momentarily stunned. The figure stopped, unmoving, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. A voice, low and steady, cut through the night air. "You think you can hide from us forever, Alice?" Alice's stomach turned, The voice was unfamiliar, but the tone, so filled with disdain, so unfeeling, sent a chill down her spine. "You don't know what you're up against," the figure continued. "The Order will have you. It's only a matter of time." Lyra's eyes flared with anger. "Leave now before you regret it." The figure's lips curled into a smirk. "You think I fear you, Keeper?" With a sudden, swift movement, the figure raised their hand, and a dark energy surged toward them. Before Alice could react, Lyra raised her own hand, and a brilliant flash of light erupted between them, blocking the attack. The figure staggered back, clearly thrown off balance, but Alice didn't have time to think about it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she felt the power deep within her stirring, begging to be used. The energy she had struggled to control, the same energy she had only just begun to tap into, suddenly surged to the surface. "No!" Lyra shouted, but it was too late. Before Alice could stop herself, a bolt of raw energy shot from her hands, colliding with the figure in front of them. The force of the blast sent the cloaked figure tumbling backward, their body crackling with the energy they absorbed, but they didn't fall. Instead, they stood again, eyes glowing a bright, unnatural red. "You fool," the figure spat. "You think that power is enough? You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Alice's breath came in shallow gasps as she realized what had happened. The figure was no ordinary member of the Order. They were something more, something worse. And in her desperation, in her panic, Alice had made a grave mistake. Lyra stood between Alice and the figure, her body tense and ready to strike again. "You don't understand the danger, do you?" Lyra said, her voice deadly calm. "You think the Order will just take you and leave. They will do much worse than that. They will break you piece by piece. You've only seen the tip of the iceberg." Alice felt the weight of her own power. But this time it was different. It was like a fire that threatened to burn out of control. And for the first time, she didn't know how to stop it. "I have to stop this," Alice said, her voice trembling with the realization. "I need to learn how to control it." Lyra's eyes softened as she turned to her. "You will, Alice, but you need to understand. The Order won't wait for you to be ready." And in that moment, Alice knew. The fight for her future had already begun. The tension in the air was palpable, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Alice stood beside Lyra, her pulse pounding in her ears as the cloaked figure from the Order stared them down. There was an unspoken promise in the air. This was no longer a game of cat and mouse. The time for hiding was over. "I've made a terrible mistake," Alice whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. She could feel the weight of the power surging through her, crackling in her veins like a storm ready to burst free. It wasn't something she could control, not yet, and the fear of losing control was all-consuming. The figure before them, whose red eyes still glowed ominously, chuckled softly. "Mistake? No, Alice. This is exactly what the Order needs. We will take you, and all of this power will be ours. Your little friends, your little rebellion, it's over." His voice was cold, filled with venom, and the certainty in his words sent a shiver down Alice's spine. He wasn't just talking about taking her physically. He was talking about stripping away her identity, her will. He was talking about breaking her spirit. But Alice was done running. Her body was trembling, yes, but not from fear. She could feel something rising within her. A quiet strength like a spark in the dark, burning brighter with every passing second. "I won't let you take me," Alice said, her voice steadier than she expected. Lyra, ever watchful, gave Alice a small nod. "You are ready," she said simply. The figure sneered, stepping forward with a fluid, predatory grace. "Ready for what? To die?" A wave of cold, dark energy shot toward them, and Alice didn't hesitate. The raw power that had been building within her burst out of her like a flood. Her hands were raised instinctively, and the air around her twisted, crackling with the force of her energy. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't refined. But it was undeniable. The power she unleashed collided with the figure's dark magic, and The shockwave from the impact was enough to make the ground tremble beneath their feet. But as the energy faded and the dust settled, the figure was still standing, unharmed, his smirk wider than before. "You think this power can stop me?" he taunted. "You're still just a child playing with matches." Lyra moved quickly, stepping in front of Alice. "He is baiting you, Alice. Don't fall for it. You've come too far to be manipulated now." But Alice could barely hear her. The surge of power within her was overwhelming, too powerful to ignore. It pulsed with a life of its own, urging her forward. She needed to control it. No, she had to. A deep breath, a moment of stillness. She closed her eyes, centering herself. The voices of doubt and fear faded into the background, replaced by a clarity she had never felt before. Her hands began to glow, warm, soft, almost like a heartbeat. But beneath that warmth was something far darker, far more dangerous. She could feel the Order's presence, their hunger, their darkness. And she could feel something else too. A deep, abiding love for her family, for Lyra, for the life she was determined to protect. The figure lunged, dark energy surrounding him like a storm. He was fast, but Alice had seen enough. She was no longer a child. She wasn't afraid. She raised her hands, and this time the energy that flowed from her was controlled. The power formed into a sphere, pulsing with light and heat, and with a cry of resolve, Alice hurled it directly at the figure. The explosion of light shattered the silence, sending the cloaked figure flying back, his body crashing to the ground. With a sickening thud, the dark energy crackled around him, but the light from Alice's attack had burned through it, leaving nothing but the remnants of his smoldering cloak. For a moment, there was silence. Alice stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest as the realization began to settle in. She had done it. She had finally done it. She had controlled her power, but just as relief started to creep in, the figure's voice, strained and barely audible, echoed through the clearing. "Do you think this is over, Alice?" he spat, his eyes flickering with malevolent energy. "You've only awakened something far greater than you can handle. The Order will always come for you." And with those words, the figure crumbled into shadow, vanishing into the night like a wisp of smoke. Alice stumbled back, breathing heavily. What just happened?" she whispered. Lyra's voice was steady, calm, but full of a deep, hard truth. "You faced your first trial, Alice, but this is just the beginning. The Order will never stop. Not until they have you. Not until they control everything." Alice felt a deep, gnawing sense of dread settle over her, but beneath it she could also feel the first stirrings of hope. The power was hers now, and though she had only begun to understand what it truly meant to wield it, she could already feel that she was no longer the helpless child she had been. "I won't let them win," Alice said, her voice filled with conviction. "I'll fight them. I'll do whatever it takes." Lyra looked at her with pride. "That's the spirit, and you're not alone in this fight. We will stand with you." But, even as she spoke, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that the Order's shadow was closing in on them. They would come again. They always did. And next time, they would be ready for her. The true war was just beginning. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue across the landscape. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and the hum of life, the kind of life that Alice had almost forgotten, the kind she had fought so hard to protect. Standing at the edge of the cliff, she looked out over the valley below, where the forest stretched endlessly, alive with possibilities. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alice allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel the weight of everything she had endured, and finally, the weight of victory. The battle against the Order had been fierce. Her mind still raced, with the memories, the flickering images of her friends, her family, all of them fighting by her side, all of them risking everything. But she had made it. They had made it. Together. "Are you ready?" Lyra's voice broke through Alice's thoughts. Gentle but steady, she appeared next to Alice, her gaze soft but resolute, as though she too could sense the significance of the moment. Alice nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for the warrior by her side. "I think so. I think we can finally move forward." Lyra smiled, a rare and genuine expression that made her look almost like the girl she once was. "You've done the impossible, Alice. You've awakened something in all of us. We will never be the same again." And that was true. The battle, while physically and emotionally draining, had revealed something profound. Alice's power wasn't just about raw strength. It was about connection. It was about the love she felt for the people around her and the world she had promised to protect. The Order had wanted to use her, to mold her into something they could control, but Alice had turned the tables. In the end, it wasn't power alone that had led her to victory. It was the bond she shared with those who stood beside her, the love that had anchored her when everything else seemed to fall apart. The world she had fought for, the world her family, her friends, and even strangers in distant lands, was not some distant dream anymore. It was real, and it was worth fighting for. "You know," Alice said, her voice soft but filled with a deep resolve, "I thought this power would be a curse, that it would destroy me, but now I see that it's a gift I can use to protect those I love." She turned to Lyra, her eyes glistening with a newfound clarity. "And to change the world." Lyra smiled again, her eyes full of pride. "You've already started changing it, Alice. You've awakened something within all of us. You're not just a fighter, you're a leader and a protector." Alice looked out over the valley, feeling the weight of everything that had led her here. The endless struggle, the heartbreak, the loneliness. The feeling of being invisible, lost in the shadows, was finally gone. She had faced her demons, confronted her darkest fears, and emerged stronger. And now, standing here, surrounded by the people who loved her and believed in her, Alice felt a sense of peace she had never known before. But there was still work to do. The Order had not been destroyed, not entirely. But they had been weakened, their grip on the world lessened. And Alice would make sure that their influence would never again creep into the lives of those who had no way of defending themselves. "I know the war isn't over," Alice said, her voice steady with purpose. "But it's time to rebuild, to start over." Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "We will rebuild, together." In that moment, something inside Alice clicked into place. It wasn't just the power that had been awakened. It was the understanding that she was not alone. She never had been. And now, she had a family of warriors, a group of people who would fight for what was right alongside her. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles to fight, more sacrifices to make. But Alice was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, and in doing so, she had found her purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange, Alice took one last look at the world before her. She was no longer the girl who had stumbled into this fight, uncertain and afraid. She was a woman, a protector, a leader, a force of change. With Lyra by her side and the memory of all those who had fought with her in her heart, Alice turned toward the future. The darkness had not won, the light had triumphed, and now it was time for Alice to lead them into a new dawn,